Hello and welcome to Different Perspectives. I'm Paul Ndiho in Washington. Tonight, we are taking a closer look at the new wave of coups in Africa. What's driving instability across the continent? Over the past few years, the continent has seen a sharp rise in military takeovers from the Sahel to West and Central Africa, reshaping governments, disrupting regional stability, and raising tough questions about the future of democracy. What once seemed like isolated power struggles has now become a broader pattern fueled by governance failures and economic pressures, insecurity, and major geopolitical shifts as well. To help us unpack this moment, we are joined live by Melvin Foote, founder of the Constituency for Africa and one of the most seasoned voices in the US on African policy. And a former colleague of mine, veteran journalist Abdul Shakur Aboud, who is following these developments very closely. Both gentlemen have decades of experience working with governments, civil society, and policymakers in Washington. They will offer invaluable insight into what's causing these coups on the continent. Melvin and Shakur, welcome to Different Perspectives.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have both of you once again. You guys have been very, very instrumental in helping me launch this platform. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So right off the bat, I guess let's start with you, maybe Mel, to set the stage for us. You've worked very, very closely as a policy advisor for the US government, but you've also worked very closely with some of these governments in Africa that have been overthrown. Bring us up to speed. Where do you see this going?
Well, it's hard to say, honestly. We've seen a lot of changes over this last few years. And it's hard for us to know whether it's internal or external. Part of the thing that's driving this are the young people, the Z generation. In Africa, they say 20, 30 years from now, maybe 1 out of every 3 people in the world are going to be an African. And African is the fastest growing region in the world, and a lot of these people are 18, 19, 20 years old, and they're computer literate. They use technology, and they communicate across borders. So some of it is the driving by this young generation that's looking for jobs, education, and opportunity in Africa. They don't see it, so they jump on boats going to Europe. They do all kinds of things to disrupt the government. So some of it legitimately is the population itself is rising up. But the other part of it is Africa still is the bastion of natural resources: gold, diamonds, coltan, lithium, and all the rest. And the Chinese want it, the Russians want it, the Americans want it, everybody else want it. And so they're competing for the natural resources in Africa. They're not considering that African people themselves need to benefit from it. And so whether these coups are all internally driven by desire or are they externally driven, I think some of that is true both ways. So I think it's internal and external, but what it means is it's hard to figure for Africa. I still think Africa got to unify, something that Kwame Nkrumah started. And Julius Nyerere and Nelson Mandela and all the others talked about a unified Africa. Well, it hasn't come to pasture. So we're still dealing with 50-something fragmented little countries that can't compete with the Western powers and that kind of thing. So they're being played like a game of chess, and they're getting moved around.
Shakur, Melvin just brought up a very important point. He talked about some of the external and internal pressures that are pushing these younger people to do what they are doing. You've covered most of these leaders very, very closely. What do you think is the leading cause of coups happening in Africa?
Yeah, thank you very much. Melvin touched everything what is happening right now, but the most important part he was talking about Generation Z, the youth. The youth is the fact that African leaders have not prepared a plan or any program to take care of the youth. The youth are trying to live. They're trying to survive, but there is no plan. After high school, after university, they have nothing. They don't see anywhere through. So you see, as Melvin said, most of them we are seeing taking boats through the Mediterranean, crossing the Sahara Desert, taking dangerous ways, looking for better life. But what we are seeing right now with the coups which happened in West Africa, when we start off Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, or Niger, they were all started by the Gen Z. If we remember well, in Mali, the demonstrations took place for almost 4 months before the military went in. In Burkina Faso, it's all the same. And lately, when we look at Madagascar, is a very good case. The youth came out complaining about lack of water, lack of electricity, lack of services. But then suddenly it turned around and called for change of government. But what I see in this all thing we are having now in Africa is that the Gen Z, as we said, they are technically savvy. They're using all the internet to organize themselves. But what is lacking is an organized institution or organized party or leaders to drive them to get to their goal. And that is what is lacking. And I think this is all coming from many years of the government or single parties or multi-party system suppressing the media, suppressing the opposition, and there was no time, or there is no time, to cultivate political opposition, to cultivate political leaders to take over. So we are seeing Africa suffering since the 60s, from single party system to so-called democratic system, but there is no plan for the future of Africa. And I think those are the things which are creating problems. They were promised democracy. We don't see any democratic form. We are promised economy, but there is no economic plans. So it's very difficult to say where we are going and what's going to happen.
I see Melvin nodding. Before I come to Melvin, you brought up a very interesting point. You talked about how these revolutions are led by young people, the Gen Z, right? But how would you compare to the coups that happened previously in some of these areas to what we are seeing now? Back in the day, those coups were largely driven by disgruntled soldiers and educated soldiers in some cases. But now we are seeing savvy soldiers, people who have been at the top of their game. You look at all these leaders who have taken over the coup, they look at the timing, they tap into that energy that you talked about of the Gen Z, and they have been able to successfully pull off these coups. Melvin, if you had to look back, maybe in the 90s, even before that, and maybe Shakur at some point you can also weigh in, what are the key differences?
Your point is well taken, and I agree with my colleague on all the points he's making. A lot of them were strictly about power. And, back then, the military guys, I was in Ethiopia during the time of the revolution, and when Haile Selassie was deposed. And the military guys who took over ended up taking over all the houses of the bourgeois. They took over the big Mercedes-Benz of the bourgeois. In other words, they supplanted the bourgeois. They supplanted those who they deposed, the Haile Selassie regime. The same thing was true in most of these countries. The guys who took power for military reasons. And sometimes they had the backing of some wealthy entrepreneur or somebody who was trying to make money. So it became somewhat of a club. They made a lot of Sani Abacha come to mind, and the people who were around Sani Abacha were also making money. So when it was time for him to leave, the soldier was saying, Mr. President, the people want you to stay. You're not going nowhere, because he was the reason that they got their money and their benefits and all that kind of thing. But I think these coups are something else. It's just out and out frustration of the Z generation that don't want to put up with it anymore. They don't see the countries doing anything to better their lives for the future. They don't see their own countries negotiating well with other countries. They see other even foreigners coming in and getting opportunities that they don't get. So I just think it's straight up frustration of this next generation. And it just happened to be a large demographic that's coming up. It's a wave, and they're going to be in charge ultimately because people die off and other ones grow up. So we don't know what they're going to do, but for sure changes in the wind.
Yeah, I can add up here that between what we saw in the 60s, 70s, and today, as Melvin explained, is that the coup leaders of that time were mostly working with the colonial powers. So if we take the question of Zaire, like Mobutu and Lumumba, you see, they were working for the CIA and the French and all that. So there was that colonial power which was still present in Africa. They were using the military to bring down whoever is not in their favor. We had the East-West pulling up. East-West, the Cold War period. But today, as we see, is the frustration of the youth. And once again, no development in democracy. And it's the same system. There was still the colonial powers who are now interested in the minerals of Africa, strategic points of areas, coming from the Comoros. I've seen so many coups. Bob Denard, the mercenary, took over and overthrew the government, but he overthrew the government because of the French. So there was a strategic importance of the Indian Ocean. When you come to West Africa, it was the question of oil, the CIA wanting oil for the American companies. But today, we see in West Africa, the youth asking the French to move and go out. It was a very big development, but unfortunately, Africa did not take advantage of it. We saw France, the biggest country or colonialist, being removed from Burkina Faso, Mali. The way they were removed, everybody was surprised and the youth were excited. But now they're gone. We're seeing them coming back through the back door. The French came back door to the Madagascar. They took the president of Madagascar and took him to a reunion. So it's something that the Africans have no plan. The youth have done what they are supposed to do, but they lack the leaders to fight the colonial powers. That's number one. And number two is to fight the people who are coming and ripping off African resources. Those two powers now are competing, and Africans have no leader to fight them back. And they cannot unite anymore. And now we see that Africa is more divided than ever. I was pointing out, during the 60s, 70s, 80s, Africa was so united for Palestine. But today, Palestine has been bombarded. We see Africa absent. And that's what is so sad happening in Africa right now, because they're so divided. They've been divided by the colonial powers. And now we're trying to figure out what's going to happen.
You know, both of you brought up something that I wanted to go back to. You talked about how these youth-led protests have, in a way, they have garnered support of the entire community. You look at those coups that have happened in West Africa and elsewhere. The young people do their part, but somehow they are overtaken by these quote-unquote soldiers who are not even part of the revolutions when they start, but they take advantage of the leaderless protests, the leaderless revolutions, and they end up losing what could have maybe turned into better for them. Now, to the points that you made, I wanted to maybe bring up something. Do you see this as an erosion of democracy? This is why the coups are happening, or it's all about structural governance issues as related to some of those countries that have experienced that?
There is an erosion for democracy, definitely. There is no democratic structure in any African country. Olusegun Obasanjo in 2022, I think, he had a conference in Nigeria and he questioned, is democracy really the system African countries need? And that question has to be answered. So there is an erosion of democracy in Africa. And then when you look at the question of the youth and lack of leaders, as I said earlier, and Melvin also said, this multi-party system which we are talking about is really one-party system, one single party remaining in power. In Tanzania, what we had elections recently, we've seen CCM has been in power for 64 years. How can you talk of democracy if one party is ruling the country for so long and not bringing anything new? So the thing here is that the erosion of democratical system You don't have strong judicial system, no media, no parliament. So there is nothing happening. And it is the same everywhere. It's like a photocopy machine, photocopy paper. I would say you put it on each country and it's happening the same way. Yeah, because it's the same.
I like your analogy.
It's just like when we say IMF is taking the same economical plan to every African country and it works. No, it can't work. Take the example. I'll go back to Madagascar. In Madagascar, André Rajoelina came to power because of what? He demonstrated when he was mayor asking for change. But because he didn't have that power, the military special forces gave it to him. 5, 6, 7 years later, he didn't do anything better. The youth came out. The youth demonstrated, but the same guy who put André Rajoelina to power said, listen, guy, I gave you the power, you didn't do nothing. I'm taking it over now. And that's what happened. And that's what is happening in other countries, is that now they feel like even if we give it to the civilians, they can't do anything better. Probably we have a little bit of education now. We're well off. We can take it over. And I think that's what's happening. I don't know, Melvin, what do you think?
I would add to that the Africa Union. We all knew about the Organization of African Unity, and we were all proud. I was in South Africa when they launched the diaspora as the 6th region of Africa. We're supposed to be the 6th region of Africa. I was down there dancing and singing with all the other folks down in South Africa. But look what happened to the Africa Union. You know, here we got Sudan with the world's greatest Holocaust going on right now is Sudan. And where is the Africa Union on this? We saw the coup d'etat taking place in West Africa. Where is the Africa Union to step in with some teeth to actually make something happen? So what we call economic bodies, what we call governance systems in Africa, they simply do not exist. And I'm not sure in the short term, they're totally dependent on the EU and the US and others for their resources, the basic resources. They got to come begging for the basic resources because countries don't pay dues and all this kind of thing. Africa's in a real mess, and I'm not totally sure how we're going to get out of it. You know, I'm hoping that another Nelson Mandela will emerge or something. There's a lot of dynamic young people out there. We're feeling the same thing, even among those of us in the United States, the diaspora. We're sorely lacking leadership, charisma leadership that can actually move us to a whole nother level. But Africa right now, and the rest of the world knows it. The Chinese know it, the Russians know it, the US know it. And so they're basically playing checkers and chess over Africa natural resources, just like they did with the Berlin crisis. So anyway, I'm going to have to leave you because I got to join a call on Somalia talking about the same thing. But they're sitting there waiting for me. But anytime that I could be on the show, I would be happy to, Paul. And I'm glad to see that you're out here doing what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Mel, and we appreciate your insight. I will look forward to maybe having another edition talking specifically about this topic. Thank you so much for your time, Mel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Nice to see you.
Very good. So, Shakur, let's keep the conversation going. Mel brought up something very interesting. He talked about the lack of leadership when it comes to Africa Union, when it comes to the regional blocks, ECOWAS, SADC, you have the East African community, you even have the Arab League in this. Can you speak to that? Because I think he made a good point there. He says, where is the leadership of Africa? We see all these coups happening. Yes, the best they come up with, they send a communique, they condemn the coup. That's about it. These coups are happening because all those people have seen that they can do it and get away with it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, the thing is that when AU was created, as Melvin said, in South Africa, taking over from Organization of African Unity, which helped the liberation of African countries, people thought that AU will bring in a new form of democracy and new form of leadership to bring Africa to where it was. It had all these programs of dividing Africa, as he said, into regions, and each region had to develop itself economically, judicially, structurally, and then reach to a point where we will have one single market. The single market of Africa Union was passed 2 years ago, but up to today, nothing is happening. And the main reason is that AU remained the same, because the African leaders who were in power were the same leaders who were there before the AU was created. So it formed a situation where there is division. You have a place like Cameroon, the president, 92 years old, he has been there for X time of years. You have Museveni on the other side, and now you have a young leader in Mali. Those two generations cannot communicate together, so
Absolutely.
they can't bring
That's a good
together what is needed for change. You have somebody as Sonko in Senegal who has been fighting an old generation. So AU remained and is still like a club for the old boys. So all these old leaders remain there and support each other, and they are divided, as Melvin said now, by once again, we are seeing almost Cold War being played on African ground. You have the Russians, you have the Indians, you have the Chinese. Chinese have made a way through into Africa, but African leaders themselves lack the patriotism which existed. You had somebody like Gaddafi. People are questioning. Gaddafi was killed because he wanted a united Africa. He wanted a single currency for Africa. He wanted a single economic market for Africa. But what happened to him, we know the results. So it's the same thing. Africa is divided between the Anglophone, the English-speaking, the French-speaking, the Portuguese-speaking countries. So each of these groups already have their own interests. And now you add the United States, you add Russia, you add in China. It has become a problem for the leaders to reach to a point. So when there is a coup, the leaders are divided because of interest, depending on who organized that coup. Although we'll say the Gen Z, but we know West Africa was under the French. So all French-speaking countries would have supported, so they wouldn't have a unified position to try and bring change. We saw ECOWAS, West Africa, was very significant when Mali took over. They had to go and negotiate 1 year, 2 years, and then 3 years to bring into civilian rule. Up to now, nothing has happened. They took action, sanctions and everything, but it's not happening. What happened in Benin last week, had it not been for the Nigerians, because the French is no longer there, the Nigerian army went in and stopped the coup. So we are still back to the same old system, that Africa needs the leaders who are ready to bring change. Their calls, the people like Botswana, the new leader of Botswana, he is trying to bring a lot of change, but Botswana is not one of the countries which you would say has problems. That's one of the countries of example in Africa. You have Rwanda. Yeah, well, and then you have Rwanda. Kagame has been there for a long time, but Kagame has developed economically his country, although his political ambitions and political decisions, we know is that he has muzzled the opposition. So you question yourself, now, where is that democracy? He's killed a lot of people. Anyone who's opposing him, he will go for him, even in South Africa, even in Dubai, and bring them to justice. So he is known for that. So you'll question yourself. But you will ask, is that much better? Will that leaders like that, who have a vision, who have a determination to bring change to their people, is what is needed in Africa?
Yeah, Shaku, there are people who have argued, for example, that in places like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and all these other places where coups have taken place, these coup perpetuators, guess what they say? They say that the leaders who are in power, the incumbent leaders in power, have failed to bring about peace and stability. They cite jihadist violence as an example of why they need change of government. From where you stand, and as a person who covered this for a very long time, is this legitimate critique on behalf of the incumbent governments, or this is one way of trying to, take over government, and they use the pretext of insurgency as a way to capture power?
No, I think it's a legitimate critic, but once again, when you look at it, they came to power because of the Gen Z or Generation Z. When we talk of Burkina Faso, yes, you talk of Mali. In the north of Mali, you had the Tuareg fighting all this time. You had the jihadists who were fighting in Burkina Faso, but they came from the influence of the Nigerian Boko Haram. So you have that as an excuse, or has that as a reason. But at the same time, they took over from the youth who did not have any leadership or any organization to lead them. So in a way, because of the vacuum, they have a point. The opposition, as I said earlier, during all this time, has not been organized together to have a one voice and become strong. In each of African countries, you will hear that there are 10, 15, 20 political parties. How can they share government? 20 political leaders. They can't join together. The thing is that you have 20 political parties because each one wants to, the one who wins, they will go to the one who wins and tell them, listen, I'll give you my 10% support, I'll give you my 2%, you give me a ministry, you give me this director, and so forth. So the military who are in power in Mali, they've seen this, the military coups taking place in Burkina Faso. They've seen that things have been going badly. There's corruption, there is democracy deteriorating. For them, the power is security. So they are using security as an issue. But we are seeing in Burkina Faso, the leader is doing something. He's brought some economical change. He's doing some patriotic issues like asking people no longer to import food, use Burkina's food to generate new system of economical market. So there is some hope on that side, but then they cannot stay into power. All that, as we said, they have to share power with the civilian. So the reason of jihadists in the north of these countries, the Sahel countries, can be in certain way legitimate the way they're talking to.
How about we've seen in some cases significant celebrations, public celebrations after some of these coups. What does this say about the citizens' faith in democratic institutions? And how should, let's say, African leaders interpret this? Is it a sentiment that sorts of like supports these coup leaders or coups to happen? Or is it something that maybe we are yet even to talk about, or historians are yet to write about?
I think the celebration you see is that it comes from the frustration. The youth and the people are frustrated to see a government in power for 20, 30, 40 years doing the same thing. And you have people in power who are enriching themselves. You can see one person, let's say his salary is $2,000, but he has a mansion of $50,000. He has a Prado, he has a Mercedes-Benz, he has a BMW. You ask yourself, where is he getting the money? So all that, when you put it together, the people are tired of seeing that, while the people in the streets don't even have bread to eat, while the others who are in the government with $1,000 a month salary living in luxury. So the celebration is to say, thanks God, this is gone. This oppression is gone. We hope for a better future. But that better future, they know they don't have it. They are hoping that the new military leaders will bring them new hope. But they're forgetting that the military leaders are in the military camp. They are not economists. They are not politicians. They are not, I would say, developers. So there is a challenge over there. The opposition, the people who are celebrating, are lacking also leaders to confront the military and say, this is our plan. Let's sit down and work together. And that's what I'm seeing, is that the people are celebrating that they're tired of the dictatorship, they're tired of oppression, and now they're hoping for better life. But will that better life come is a question.
Yeah. Interesting. In case you are just joining us, we are streaming live across all social media platforms. We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Tell us what you think about this new wave of coups and what's driving them. Of course, here in Washington, I'm joined by my good friend Abdul Shakur Aboud, my former colleague at the Voice of America. His insight is invaluable. Earlier on, we had Melvin Foot, one of the leading voices on African foreign policy. And unfortunately, he had to leave, but I'm still with my good friend Abdul Shakur Aboud. Shakur, let me come back to you. Washington always frames a foreign policy or Africa policy around countering Russia and China. Does this approach, and I've seen in some cases where these coups have happened, you see Russian flags flying around. I'm yet to see Chinese flags flying around. Is there something that Washington can do to make sure that maybe they tap into this anger of young people and try to help those young people on the African continent? Without, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing here is that it depends who is in the White House. So if we talk of today with Donald Trump, we know during his first term, he had absolutely almost no interest with Africa. So the African policy of Trump is definitely different from what we saw with Obama, or we saw with Bush, or we saw with Biden. And as you said, it's true. The American policy comes as a reaction to what is already happening. It has its strategic interest in Africa. It has its political strategies in Africa, but it looks at Africa for its resources. And when it comes to this stage we are in here, where China is completely taken over African countries, or Russia is trying to go in, or India as well, when we talk of India and these countries, we're talking of BRICS, America is now playing catch up, is trying to see what it can do. So America has to have a much better Africa policy. Depending on who is there. I remember during the 90s, you had Andrew Young, who created also a big organization called Africa One, and he wanted to create a policy where America can follow to look into Africa in the political, economic, security sphere. But unfortunately, that organization was not as strong as it should be, because I was talking with Melvin shortly. He said the problem is that the Africans themselves don't know what they want from America. They are not united to lobby together what is best for Africa, to guide America to come and see what they can work together. We saw Obama trying to bring for the first time Africa-US meeting, and then Biden followed up, but there was no follow-up. This could be a fact that the United States itself had other issues around. You had Biden with the Gaza, you had Biden occupied with the Ukraine war. So Africa was a part which was forgotten. So every time there is an event, it makes America leave Africa altogether. So you have Trump right now. Africa is not a priority for him at the moment, as we have seen. He is more focused now when we are talking on Venezuela, Latin America. He's more focused on trying to get peace in Ukraine, where he's failing. But we are seeing, he says he's stopped wars in 8 areas, but we are seeing that when they signed the agreement between Rwanda and DRC, the second day fighting went on. So you have this problem that America has not tapped on its African experts to prepare a strong policy program so that it can work with African countries for the interests of Africans and not fight with China or Russia or India. Africa is big, it's enough. It can have a role in helping African countries and have its own policy. But the conflict between America and the interests of the Europeans or Russians or China, they're contradicting each other, and we see a confrontation all the time.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. French. You come from a country that was a former colony of the French. I don't know if they ever left or if they're still there, but
they're still there.
All these places that we are talking about have something in common. The French influence. They are all former colonies of the French. The French are heavily involved in the politics of the day in those countries. From your vantage point, when you look at that, right, are these narratives that lean on opposing French influence, are they genuine for a grassroots movement, or it's a political tool exploited by these junta leaders or junta leaders?
No, I think it's a genuine issue. That's why they kicked them all out. Because when you look French in all these countries, let's take Niger. Niger produces a lot of uranium from France. But Niger has uranium which is supplying to France and supplying 15% of its energy needs. But all these years, France has been taking all this uranium to France, but you don't have electricity or energy enough in Niger. People don't have electricity in their houses in Niger. So when you look at that, people say, what is the use of this relationship? You take a look in Ivory Coast. All the cocoa goes to France and Belgium to make chocolates, but you don't have a chocolate industry in Ivory Coast or even in Mali per se. So people are tired to see that the Western countries are exploiting African resources and not giving anything back. And then they're surprised.
Before you, let me get back to that point that I just brought up. The issue of chocolate, for example. I recently, over the summer, I took my kids and my wife. We went to Hershey Park, the world famous chocolate factory, right? So it was great for us to be there. The kids had fun, but I was disturbed by one thing. All the 97% of the chocolate comes from West Africa, right? There was not a single mention of any of those countries other than maybe seeing a picture saying that it's from Ghana, from Ivory Coast, from all those other places, right? But there's nothing there. There's no relationship between Hershey Park, where people go for fun. People spend millions and millions of dollars every year to go there to take their families. But there was no relationship between that and where the cocoa comes from. As a kid whose father has been a farmer all my life, it really hit me so hard. So when you bring up that point, it resonates with me. These French companies, these Belgian companies, American companies go to Africa, extract whatever they can extract, bring it over here, add whatever value that they want to add, then ship it back there at the expense of the hard labor, the sweat of our poor fathers, mothers, our poor Africans.
Exactly. That's why it comes to your question, if it's genuine. So I think it's genuine. People are tired of this for 60 years now of independence, and you don't see any industry in Africa. There is nothing coming back. The added value of things go back to Europe and then comes as a finished product, and they sell it expensive for us to do with it. When we continue, take example of Nigeria. Nigeria is the largest producer of oil in Africa. But there has been no oil refinery for years until So you see, those are the things which are frustrating African youth. Those are the things which are frustrating these military guys. They understand that. They see what it is. But running a government, running a political organization is not an easy task. And that is what is lacking in Africa. What is lacking is how to run an organization which will be able to take over power and have plans for the development of African countries. So you are having that problem right now in all African countries, except when you look at Rwanda. I go back to Rwanda. He's very smart. He's bringing even Formula One to Rwanda the first time in Africa. So those are things which you have to have vision for. You have the president of Burkina Faso who now has taken the Burkina tomatoes and adding value to it, and they're selling it for themselves. That's what's needed. And that's what is happening now in some of those countries which have changed to military rule. But the old guards, the old countries which have old leaders have not taken that seriously. You had Magufuli was one of the other leaders of Tanzania who said, well, listen, you're taking all of our minerals and we are getting nothing out of it. You have to build and refine whatever you're taking here in Tanzania and then go with it outside. So that mentality was what was there when Nyerere wanted to do for Africa, or Nkrumah, or per se, Gaddafi from Libya. They wanted that Africa have its own production sites, and that is what is lacking. They will say that we don't have the technical know-how, we don't have the means, but Africa now has all these young people who are well educated. We are living in the diaspora. We can go back. The World Bank has a program asking African countries to consider programs where they will take African diaspora back there to work and give back to the countries. You'll see African countries sign a contract with France or China or whatever, and then the people who are coming, the engineers and everyone, they come from France or they come from China. Why not take Africans themselves? And Africans are available. So that needs to be planned. That needs to be worked out. And that's what is missing. And I think the youth understand that. They said, if we had that, we would not run back. We would not run to Europe. We would not come to the United States. We would not take this dangerous journey and look for better life. I think that's what is happening, and it's genuine. The situation where colonial powers were just siphoning off African resources and not returning anything back.
Great point. I think you are very correct in saying that the intellectual balance of power has been shifting in our favor. We can now, in tandem with technology, social media, we have access to more information than our great-grandparents, our parents ever did. Today, a kid in a remote village in Africa can attend classes at Harvard via or courtesy of technology or via the internet. So that barrier has been broken. And I like the fact that you pointed out that the World Bank and other international institutions are beginning to tell those countries to recruit from the diaspora. But I also wanted to go back to the point that you made about Rwanda. Yes, Rwanda is a great example. There is development. It's something that you can see, you can feel, you can touch. You can basically feel it, right? But there are those people who argue that prosperity without democracy is like building a beautiful house without a great foundation. Why am I talking about that? All this that we see, we've seen places that have had wars. Even for the case of Rwanda, it's not too long ago, just slightly over 20 years ago, that they had a genocide over there. What caused the genocide? It was the division. This tribe doesn't like that tribe. This tribe has oppressed that tribe. And people had to rise up. And you saw what happened there. There are people who argue that even with this prosperity that we are talking about, this development that we are seeing does not translate into democracy or democratic norms, as people here in the West would call it. Your response?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yes, it does not. People in Rwanda are not all that happy as we can think, because they don't have that freedom of expression. I agree with that. And that's what people and experts are questioning. Kagame, what is he doing? He's not building the future where the Rwandese will have a prosperous country for everybody. The danger is, can we see again, when we say never again, will we see a 1994 again in Rwanda? Because once a leader like that leaves, we have seen it, be it in Congo, be it in Yugoslavia, be it in Romania, whenever a dictator leaves, there's always chaos because there's no one else to take over. Even if you build your own, if you prepare your own kids, there will be dissatisfaction to that. So I totally agree with you yet, is that Rwanda is lacking that part of it. The question is it democracy that we want, or is it fairness of all the people to have together? The freedom of people to be able to express their ideas, to share and participate in the development. It shouldn't be only on one side. It should be a development for everybody and integrate everybody together. So that's what we can say. When I was using Rwanda most of the time, is the question of the development which is happening. You have all the services, you have everything which any other African country would like to have, would envy to have, and keep their youth in the country. But then it is true, you need some sort of freedom, some sort of planning to give people the chance to participate in the development you're doing. You look at Botswana, you can say that it's a well-stated problem. You look at Mauritius, but there are definitely some problems. You look at Namibia, it's trying hard. So it is possible to have the development and use that development which Africa has. We have the minerals, we have the resources, we have the technical know-how right now, but integrate everybody together, but not just look it blindly. We have a development, but we oppress people. Yeah, there is going to be a problem in Rwanda if they don't take real precaution on how to move on. Because after Kagame, what next?
Great point. Let's go back to the topic at hand. How much of this instability we are seeing is tied to economic distress, youth unemployment, inflation, lack of opportunity, and what kinds of interventions do you think could make a difference?
What could make a difference really is, I think, for more regional cooperation, more Africans to understand what is really happening, what they need to do, what they need to work together, the goals which AU has put together. What you need to do is that these coups come out from frustration because of, as you said, lack of economic opportunities, jobs, and everything, to look into that deeply. How do we solve this? Africa is a huge market. How can these African countries work together? Because when you look at the coup leaders, they're having a problem. They were having a problem to work with ECOWAS. They have been removed from ECOWAS. They wanted to create their own organization. But between themselves also, they have not reached an agreement. So there is that problem which is underlining what is happening. Is it the outside influence? Is it the lack of know-how or mistrust between the different parts? How do they handle? ECOWAS suspended Mali, suspended Guinea, suspended Burkina Faso. Is that the way forward? What needs to be done? Should they work together to bring a change? Or if you give them a deadline, okay, have elections after 3 years. But what type of elections are you having? Who is running for those elections? How are those elections going to be held? The reason why the coup happened, because the opposition was absent. And the opposition cannot be made in 2, 3, 4 years. How can you ask for a regime to bring back civilian rule in 1 year when that same country had one single party for more than 20 years? The others have no time to build up themselves. So there is that challenge. Before you go to economic issues or any other issues, you have the structural challenge to build judiciary systems which are going to be fair to everybody, to build institutions which will stand for development and economic growth, but also build institutions which will build strong political parties which will fair sharely in the playfield, so that it will be it'll be a fair ground to play, because you'll have the ruling party, they have the most money, and then the opposition party have nothing to do. How are they going to run their campaign? How are they going to run their elections? There must be a system to bring the ground level together, to make it a fair playground for everybody before we can have and see any significant change.
We are almost out of time. I'll give you the final word. Where do we have a way out of this situation, or we are going to see more coups happening as a result of what we are seeing already? An attempted coup last week in Benin. People are going to try to take power regardless of what's happening on the ground, because they also want to feel like they are part of a system that embraces them.
Unfortunately, I would say that we are going to see the same system going on, because I don't see any changes or significant changes in any of those African countries which have not seen coup d'etats. I don't see any changes in political systems in most of the countries. The latest case, as we said, Tanzania, which was one of the safest, peaceful, democratic so-called country, and we saw what happened. Just the election erupted and the country is now in shambles. There is a big problem in Tanzania. You have Kenya already, we have had that experience, but after Ruto, you question yourself, what's going to happen? You have Museveni, you're coming from Uganda. What's going to happen after Museveni? And you have DRC and Burundi, now we're seeing them fighting. So when you look at it, it's a sad picture. And then you see the outside powers, the Chinese. Chinese don't involve themselves in political events or anything that so you'll say they won't be concerned. But then you have the Russians. You have the French, who are not yet going to leave Africa. You have the Americans. They still want the oil and the riches of Africa. So you don't have a strong organization. The African Union is not strong enough to be able to challenge all what is facing Africa. So unfortunately, I would like to say, I would like to have hope that there is change soon, but I don't see, because when I look at countries, each single country, I don't see any political leader coming out. Even if when I look at the Comoros, even if they say Azali has been there for 20 years, but who next to take over in that country? It's very difficult to believe there will be any change soon, probably in the next 5-10 years. But unfortunately, I have to say that the situation is grim.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Shakur.
Thank you very much. And let's say, keep hope alive, as our brother used to say. Shaka Sali, remember him.
Yeah, yes, let's keep hope alive. Like you correctly said, Shaka used to say that all the time. Shakur, it was an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. And also a special thanks to Melvin Futa, the founder of the Constituency for Africa, and one of the most respected voices here in Washington, D.C. And of course, don't forget to follow and like Paul Ndiho on X, Substack, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Spotify. I will see you on another edition of Different Perspectives, maybe next week. For now, so long from Washington. Thank you so much.